I'm here with the renowned nutritionist, Dr. Oz Garcia. Oz is a remarkable man, one of the pioneers of this new concept of intermittent fasting, which is sweeping the world by storm. More and more Silicon Valley CEOs are now adopting a practice called intermittent fasting, and it's supposed to help them lose weight, help their body naturally heal. It has been proven to have a massive correlation with longevity, and it's also supposed to increase your cognitive ability. But the question is, what is intermittent fasting? How do you apply it to your life? How do you get started? So Dr. Oz Garcia, we are here in Sardinia, Italy at A-Fest on longevity. Dr. Oz is about to take the stage at A-Fest where he's going to be talking about intermittent fasting, but I wanted to bring him to you, our audience here on Mind Valley membership, so that he and I can go deep in this topic and produce sort of like a manual for you guys to apply this in your life.
Very
Oz,
good.
welcome to Mind Valley.
Thank you very much, Ray.
So first, I'd love to get a little bit of an idea from you. Why is intermittent fasting such a hot trend right now? What does it do to your body and your mind?
Number one, to the hot trend part of it, I think as more people are coming around to the fact that there are different paths to possibly extending their lifespan, their well-being span, but also understanding that they can hack different practices to make their body work better. So it's not only about living longer, it's can I maximize my efficiency now? And what are the different practices, what are the different habits, what are the hacks that I can bring on board? And given the fact that intermittent fasting has come from the edges to the mainstream, more people are adopting the practice because it's very simple to apply. Right. I can't, if I was to say anything about it, you're going to get the same results by doing intermittent fasting a day a week, 2 days a week, as you would by doing calorie restriction your whole life. So there doesn't seem to be all that much difference in terms of blood parameters. If you're checking your bloodstream, if you're doing calorie restriction, and you underate 30% of your calories for a month, and instead you were doing 2 days a week where you were doing intermittent fasting, it's not going to look all that different. And because of that, you've got a hack. You're actually hacking long-term fasting. You're hacking calorie restriction. How can I get the best results possible in the shortest amount of time? And we know that that's one of the things that people are looking for anyway in the way that the world is.
Now, what does it do for your body?
There are a multitude of effects and a particular impact that I would say is extremely important, certainly as you're getting older. I would say the first thing that I'm interested in is inflammatory control. So for many people that are dealing with chronic pain, and beyond that, they're dealing with autoimmune problems, you're going to find that by doing intermittent fasting, by doing any kind of intermittent fasting protocol at all, you can control inflammatory effects within your tissue. That bodes well not only for controlling pain, but inflammatory effects that occur within the human brain. So from there, you can easily jump to how well your brain performs, how, I wouldn't say how smart you are, but how well short-term memory works, long-term memory, vigilance, focus, alertness. All of these are different features of the human brain that seem to be amplified when you're doing intermittent fasting, or as a consequence of intermittent fasting. You have a brain that's working substantially better. So it's working on two fronts. Intermittent fasting is not only working on the performance of your brain, but it's also working on producing a better brain. Wow. So one of the things that we know is you're going to produce a lot more neuronal growth factor from the cerebellum. You're going to produce a lot more BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So you're actually creating neurogenesis. You're building a better brain as a consequence of doing intermittent fasting.
And this is what's becoming so popular as a practice among Silicon Valley CEOs.
That's correct. Their primary asset is their brain.
Right.
And how can I make this thing work better? What are the shortcuts to do that? Oh, really? I can lose a meal here and there? And I can get that much more brain back, that much more brain capacity back, all right, let me try it.
And not only that, but there's huge correlations with longevity as well.
That's correct. There are a number of studies. There's studies that are coming out now almost continually on the effects of intermittent fasting on human performance, the fact that it may very likely affect how long you live. But animals that are being fed on intermittent fasting practices, these are genetically engineered mice that would have a lifespan of about 8 months on intermittent fasting and different forms of it. So what would be the equivalent of what a human being would be doing, their lifespan may stretch out to 12 months or longer. On autopsy, when you open up the animal, you'll also find that the organs look extremely younger, much younger than the chronological age of the animal at that point. So the heart, the adrenals, liver tissue, and so on, especially the brain. Intermittent fasting is a very broad subject. So it covers just about every kind of fasting short of water fasting, extended water fasting, calorie restriction, where you actually put an individual, a species, an animal on 30% less calories over their lifetime. So if we were to eliminate those two, just about everything else in between, whether you're doing periodic fasting, that is, you're picking 3 to 5 days of being on about 300 to 400 calories per day, we would call that intermittent fasting. So you could actually do a juice fast. That's what many people would refer to as juice fasting. Using a high protein powder, for instance, a vegetarian protein powder that's extremely low in calories over the course of about 5 days. So we would call that intermittent fasting too, because it comes to an end and it can be repeated again at another point. The more common ways of doing intermittent fasting, the ones that I advocate that I think work extremely well, and most people can do it, you can comply with it, is picking about 48 hours out of a week, not necessarily back to back, but during that period of time, you've got a feeding period that is within 24 hours you may eat, you may have an eating window that lasts 8 hours. The rest of the time, the other 22 hours, you're pretty much on fluids, on liquids, for instance. And I find that that tends to mimic in large measure the same effect that you're going to get if you're on an extended fast or calorie restriction. Most of the studies that are available now on how it is that the body responds to calorie restriction in small periods of time, that is underfeeding for a day or two during the week, what's also referred to as the 5-2 method. So there are 5 days where you're feeding normally, you're eating your normal diet the way that you would regularly, and that's with a caveat. In other words, I do think that what you eat does make a difference, but you're picking 2 days and you're losing a certain amount of meals during that period of time.
So just to go back for a second, what you're saying is intermittent fasting covers a very broad spectrum.
That's correct.
And there are certain types of fasting, and I know because there are people in our company who do this, and they go for 3 to 5 days with nothing more than a juice in the morning. And they have coffee, they have water, but it's nothing more than a juice in the morning. And that's a form of fasting, like a 3 to 5 day fast. What do you call that?
That would also be called an intermittent fast. So what you got to look at is that intermittent fasting is a broad umbrella. And then all these styles, these ways that an individual can trick out what they're doing in terms of underfeeding or undereating, falls under the rubric of being intermittent fasting of one form or another. So I tend to have a more sporadic, Zen-like kind of approach to intermittent fasting. I'll do it as I kind of feel it. So I may lose a breakfast, I could easily lose a lunch, I may lose 2 dinners a week, and in that way, I'm continuously doing intermittent fasting.
I see. So what you're doing is a type of intermittent fasting where, say, you allow your body to eat. You eat only during an 8-hour window.
That's correct.
And you do that on 2 days a week.
That's right.
Okay, so in other words, Monday to Friday, you may be on your regular diet, but on a Saturday and a Sunday, you might say, wake up, skip breakfast,
right,
eat at noon, and then eat at 8 p.m., and then not consume any other food except water or maybe coffee or tea, in the remaining 16 hours of the
Yeah,
day.
and also too, what we know is that there's a certain kind of phenomena that begins to occur to the body after you've been free of food. Your digestive system has nothing in it for about 10 to 12 hours. At that point, your body starts to regenerate itself in a variety of ways, and we can get very specific about it. Your brain starts to regenerate new neuronal stem cells, different aspects of your body, different organs start to respond very favorably at about that 12-hour point, more or less. So it really doesn't matter where you kind of place those 12 hours plus of undereating, so long as you're clocking about 10 to 12. That's where we know the phenomena begins to occur, where you're getting the benefits of undereating, of intermittent fasting.
Got it. So an easy way to apply it then is to basically go 12 hours without food on a Saturday or a Sunday.
That's correct.
Now, you said you do it for 16 hours. Is there any difference between 12 and 16?
You're going to get, I'm looking for a different kind of phenomena. So I'm older than the average person I think may be listening to us right now. So I'm 67. And what I want to do is I want to maintain a certain amount of body mass. I keep my percentage of body fat at about 8% more or less. In the winter goes up to about 10 or 11%. I want to keep my muscle mass up. There's a certain kind of functionality that I'm looking for, so I'm pushing the limits of intermittent fasting. I do eat substantially when I do come off a fast, though. So I have a feeding window where I'll make up for all the calories that I don't consume. And depending on my mood, again, given how long I've been doing intermittent fasting, which goes now well over 12 years, I'd say close to about 15, and fasting overall for close to 40 years, on and off different kinds of styles of fasting, I find this to be the most comfortable. So I can get up in the morning and I can have a caffeinated beverage, no food at all. I can have just green tea. There are different products that you can get on the market that actually have high levels of caffeine in it. I'm not a big coffee drinker, so I'll use that instead. I'll consume a substantial amount of water, something very light like miso broth or consomme, and then I'll just go right through from 7 a.m. in the morning till 7 p.m. at night. And I've got an intermittent fast, and at that point, 12 hours, I clocked it in, and boom, my day's done.
And then at 7 p.m. you'll have your meal.
I'll eat, correct.
So that is insane. Now, I'm not talking about the intermittent fasting, I'm talking about, you're 67?
Correct.
Oz.
67 and a half.
I'm 42, I have more gray hair than you. Like, you're making me look bad.
Well,
No, I'm shocked because I would have guessed you were 54. We've known each other for, a couple of months right now.
That's right.
And I would have placed you in your mid-50s.
No, I'm a lot closer to 70 than
That's incredible.
after 50. It blows my fucking mind when I wake up in the morning. I
You
realize
said you've been doing intermittent fasting for 40 years.
I've been doing fasting for 40 years or more.
Okay.
So I began fasting back in the early 1970s. I used to suffer from migraine headaches. I lived in a very typical American diet. I was a cigarette smoker. I would smoke about a pack to 2 packs a day. I was an itinerant photographer at that point in my life. So pretty much I was a gun for hire, what today would be called a paparazzi, more or less. And the work obligations, the way that I was living and so on, especially being a kid of the 60s and coming into the 70s, I was baffled by why I wasn't feeling well. I didn't have adequate amounts of energy. I could sleep 8 to 10 hours and not feel well rested. On top of that, I started to get migraine headaches. If you don't know what a migraine headache is, it feels like your head's going to explode, just blow right off. And it can run in families. There are genetic components to it. So my mother was a migraine headache sufferer, my dad was, and I was looking for answers. I didn't want to wind up like my mom on medication. The medications that existed back then for migraine headaches could get rid of your migraine, but would also get rid of a piece of you in the process. Very, very powerful drugs. And I wanted to find some other means. I discovered on one of my photo shoots a very old book, an archaic book entitled The Miracle of Fasting by Paul Bragg.
In what year was this book published?
The Miracle of Fasting has got to be at least 70 years old. And Paul Bragg was...
Or you said 70 years old?
At least 70 years old.
Okay.
It may be longer. Paul Bragg was from the school of Gaylord Hauser. These were nutritionists that were very famous in the 40s and the 50s. Gaylord Hauser was married to Greta Garbo, just to give you an idea. He popularized juicing, carrot juice, and so on, in an era when people were more concerned with having a steak on their plate, you know, with potatoes and butter, and martini lunches were very common. So nobody had a real reality, a real sense of what it was to actually underfeed, undereat fast, or take care of themselves in the ways that we do now. Paul Bragg was one of these individuals. He was an anomaly in his era, and he claimed that he could heal people through fasting.
Wow.
So I picked up Paul Bragg's book. He was an evangelist for fasting, and I picked up the book and I just kind of put it away, and I started to get a migraine headache sometime after that, within a couple of weeks of having the book. So we're talking about 1973, 1974,
right.
And in a desperate moment, rather than locking myself up in a room with as much caffeine as possible to see if I could blow this thing out, I decided to read Paul Bragg's book. So without using any medication, without using caffeine, all I did was just drink water for a couple of days. Now there's also something that comes with a migraine headache, which is the blowback afterwards. It's the hangover effect from having had this very powerful headache. And after 2 days of just drinking water, not consuming anything at all, lo and behold, I had no migraine headache hangover. And this surprised me. I had no context. We're talking about an era when there's no outlet to check this out. You know, Google didn't exist. Obviously, the internet didn't exist. And so the little bit of information that I got brought me back to the center where I found Paul Bragg's book to get more information about fasting. After that, I became, I would say, an Olympic faster. So I started to try on 3-day fasting and 4-day fasting, and then I got to the point where I could do a week on water.
Wow. Okay, now a question there. When you fasted for 2 days straight,
right,
migraines disappeared.
Correct.
Did they come back?
I recall to this day thinking back. This is after about 3 months of experimenting with fasting, not having had a migraine, and looking back and being absolutely surprised, because I would get an average of a migraine or two a week, which was unbelievably debilitating. Certainly if you had a social life, if you had to work and you had to be responsible for whatever was going on. Sometimes I'd work with a migraine right through my work obligations, and then lock myself up. So at this point, I knew that I was onto something. And just the way that things happen in life, it got me to question other things. If fasting could be doing this, you know, well, what about my food? You know, should I be looking at that? Is there any relationship between migraine headaches and any other aspect of my health with what I'm consuming? For that matter, should I be eliminating anything? And at that point, I looked at cigarettes. I was wondering, could tobacco be a dangerous thing to be consuming? And
because back then, you know, people assumed cigarettes were relatively harmless.
Well, not only that, the tobacco industries, William Morris was notorious for hiring cardiologists to actually get on TV and promote the wonders of cigarette smoking. So it was considered to be a natural stress relief, you know, and something that was good for your heart and your breathing. Right. This is a whole other era. I just gave up tobacco from one day to another. I just figured, let me give it a try. And I never picked up a cigarette again, from being a very heavy smoker. This was an era where we had the beginnings of the human potential movement. So in very diverse ways, from very different corners of the world, you had everything from EST, which was run by Werner Erhard, eventually became the Forum today. I figured, you know, let me jump into that and try something for my brain, see what that brings me. And that led me to looking at running. You know, nobody was running in the 19th century. Nobody was, Equinox didn't exist. We're talking about an era where we had Jack LaLanne, if you can remember, the guy was 90 years old, yeah, and lifting trucks. So there were Jack LaLanne fitness clubs in New York City, and I joined one. this was the next step. So it was an ongoing evolution. It was, the fasting was the path that got me to look at everything else. The next thing was food and stuff.
So question, when you started going from a 2-day fast, okay, so let's talk about the rules for the 2-day fast. So you're here what you're talking about is a full-on 2-day fast. That means you took nothing but water for 2 days.
That's right, I wouldn't consume anything but water.
So when you go on from a 2-day fast to a 3 or 4 or 5-day fast, what happened in addition to that?
There's a number of physiological events that begin to occur to the body. Never mind the good regenerative aspects of what's occurring, but you're also going through a very clinical detox. So if you were measuring the amount of neurotoxins that your body's unloading, you would find that urine would be rich with different minerals that build up in your tissue, everything from cadmium to nickel to lead to mercury, obviously. You begin to discharge that from your tissue overall. There's a breakdown in fat. So you begin to move into ketosis, which I'd say after about the 3rd day, more or less, you're breaking down fat if you're interested in losing weight. I don't think that's the most effective way to lose weight, but you're actually beginning to feel the lift from ketone bodies increasing in your tissue. There's a tremendous clarity of mind that begins to occur, I'd say about the 3rd, 4th day, as a function of all inflammatory functions within your body coming under control too. That's probably what happened when I did it the first time to deal with my migraine headaches. So little did I know that the vocabulary wasn't there, like is there something miraculous, like the miracle of fasting? But all the chemicals that produce inflammation, all the chemicals that your brain produces to actually generate a migraine headache were dropping off, were becoming corralled in large measure. And along with that, by the time you would hit the 5th day and the 6th day and so on, when you went through kind of the crappy feeling of day 3 or 4, where you would pop out was with a great sense of clarity and stability. I would say a great sense of equanimity. And these were the unexpected effects in terms of my mood, my anxiety, the episodic periods of depression. So something was occurring also chemically to my brain.
Your moods.
Correct.
Okay, so that's fascinating. Now, how does one know what type of fasting to do? How does one know if they should do a 2-day fast or a 5-day fast, or if they should do a 12-hour fast for 2 days a week? And if so, how long would they do that 12-hour fast for 2 days a week? Basically, with this plethora of choices before us, how do we know what to experiment?
Good question. I start off my clients, and what I would recommend to everybody is to actually start off with losing a meal. You know, just one micro fast. Lose dinner. You know, see if you can have your last meal at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then the rest of the day, stay on fluids. See if you can make it to breakfast, and that's a good beginning.
Got it.
You know, and for most people that have never done this before, just that exercise in and of itself will compel you, hopefully, to then try and lose 2 meals, you know, the following week and so on, so that it becomes an easy entry point, it's an easy landing, and I would say that that's the most elegant way of doing intermittent fasting, to get yourself into fasting at all.
I see. So we start with just skipping dinner.
That's correct.
Okay, and then if we find that we can tolerate that, we might skip breakfast the next day.
That's right.
Okay, so now that would be a full-on 12-hour period, roughly.
Exactly.
Up to 16 hours.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for.
Now you do this as a weekly practice, so you do this type of fasting, the 12-hour fast, twice a week?
I do it longer. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier in terms of my interest in maintaining my body in a certain condition, being able to control inflammatory parameters. I do a lot. I still run. I've been running for 40 years and racing on a regular basis. So on average, I'm doing about 6 to 8 miles per day, and I'll check that out with doing a lot of high intensity interval training. So my body, an almost 70-year-old body, doesn't have the braking systems that you would at this point. So there's much more inflammatory problems that could go wrong. Problems with your joints, ligament tears and so on. And the way that I regulate that from occurring, the way that I can keep my body running at the way that I do, is by doing intermittent fasting much more often. So it's not uncommon for me to do 3-4 days in a row where I don't have breakfast. I'll have a caffeinated beverage in the morning. I may have a couple of caffeinated beverages throughout the day.
So these are 3 or 4 days of a 12-hour fast?
That's correct.
Got it.
That is correct.
So that's another option. You don't have to do 3 or 4 days with no food whatsoever. You can do 3 or 4 days of a 12-hour fast.
Yeah, and what you wind up doing is you have a feeding window. In large measure, I'll do 3 or 4 days where I have one meal.
Got it.
And that meal may have upwards of 2,400 calories. So the way that I tend to break it, and the way that I would recommend to break it. Now, this may contradict a lot of what we know based on even listening to Jason and the Blue Zones, and what I know about Blue Zone centenarians. They eat a high plant diet, primarily vegetarian, with some animal protein added in periodically. But there are different kinds of metrics that are going on there that are not going on in our lives on a daily basis. So what I tend to do is break my fast, going into something a bit more paleo with a substantial higher amount of fat and protein. It tends to be much more pescatarian with a lot of vegetables.
Now, what about people who might not take a regular breakfast, such as myself? So my breakfast is basically protein shake with creatine and then superfoods on it.
Wonderful.
Or people who bulletproof coffee, right? So their breakfast is essentially a cup of coffee with butter in it.
Right.
Is that also, does that qualify as a fast, or does the fast means no solid?
That won't knock you out of the zone at all. It won't knock you out of the zone. You could actually start your day with a bulletproof coffee with butter.
And it's still considered fasting?
Absolutely.
Really? Now what about, okay, so in other words, you don't have to skip breakfast completely. You can have coffee, and you can even add butter to that coffee, and you are still in that fasted state.
That's correct, because one of the things that's going to happen, especially if you have bulletproof coffee, the way that Dave likes to trick it out, is it's going to throw you into a mild state of ketosis just from the beginning anyway.
Right.
Now, and that's a good way to start your intermittent fast regardless. You want to keep your energy up.
I see.
And you're going to get a long push from that amount of caffeine in the morning. That's what you really want. You want to see what's going to anchor you and what's going to get you through till late in the day when you have your...
So one way of starting is to skip dinner, but another way of starting is to simply, and this is a much easier way, is to simply skip breakfast and instead have a bulletproof coffee.
Very good. Or you can do a version of that if you're not into coffee. You can do a very strong green tea, and add a medium chain triglyceride, coconut oil, or butter into that too.
Fantastic. Now what about a protein shake?
I tend to have a protein shake for the most part.
Okay, but does that kick you out of fasting?
It's not going to do it.
It won't? Okay, so if I have a protein shake and I add creatine powder to it, I add butter to it, and because I actually dislike the taste of butter in my coffee.
What time in the morning are you getting?
Okay, so tell me how you would improve this. So basically, I would stop dinner at 8:30.
Very good.
Okay, so let's say 9 p.m. I'm done with dinner. I'm not eating again. And then I would wake up, and at 9 a.m., so 12 hours have elapsed, at 9 a.m. I would have a whey protein shake from GNC. Good. I'd add creatine to it. Creatine's great for the brain.
That's correct.
And then I'd add butter to it, and I'd add some wheatgrass to it.
Wonderful. Then you're doing that about 9 a.m.
And then I won't have lunch till 1.
Okay, good. So what are you going to have for lunch?
Typically for lunch, I'd have meat and veggies. That's
okay,
it.
good. So so you completed your fast from the night before up until breakfast time. And now you get...
But that breakfast, because of what I've combined, did take me out of my fast. So I'm fasting for 12 hours and not 16 hours.
Yeah, but also, too, there are certain things that you can put in that I would say qualify as elements that you can consume that have almost no impact at all on the momentum of the fast.
Got it. So what are those elements? So
exogenous ketones.
Okay, coffee, butter, MCT oil, coconut oil.
Exogenous ketones.
What are exogenous ketones?
Exogenous, when your body is breaking down its own fat, it's producing ketones. Ketones are a kind of fat molecule, a kind of fat body that your body burns with greater efficiency than it does glucose or sugar. So there's a preference to it in terms of what many athletes pursue, what I'll tend to pursue, what you'll find may be more comfortable for you to actually feel better overall. Looks like being in a state of ketosis, quasi-ketosis, often, several days a week, seems to have remarkable beneficial effects for your body. Your brain burns ketones with greater efficiency than it does sugar, and consequentially, there's less waste product left over from the burning of sugar.
So again, the substances we can consume to stay in a fasted state?
To get back to that, I'm gonna try and supplement what I'm consuming by also using. You can actually get ketones and consume them externally. That can go into your shake. So those ketones are called exogenous, meaning that they're coming from the outside.
But wheatgrass or whey protein?
It's not going to knock you out.
That's going to knock you out of the fast.
It's not going to knock you out.
Oh, so whey protein is fine.
That's correct. And there are different kinds of protein too. You can get high collagen protein that's not whey. You can get a high collagen protein that's considered a peptide. That's another way that you can trick out a protein powder that makes it more available.
I see.
And it also keeps you in the fasting zone.
So technically, based on my regimen, I'm fasting for 16 hours.
That's correct. So you're getting the boost. And if we were to test you, for instance, by using either glucose meter or using ketone stick, so you can test your urine and see if you're in ketosis from the fast, you would find that the shake wouldn't knock you out.
The shake wouldn't knock me out.
Will not knock you out.
Will not knock me out.
That's
right.
Correct. Now, if you broke your breakfast with, 2 eggs, bacon,
eggs
toast,
would knock you out.
Correct. That's going to knock you out.
Got it. Got it. So why is that? Because eggs are protein. And whey protein is also protein. Why is it that whey protein wouldn't knock me out, but eggs would knock me out?
You're also talking about kinds of protein, qualities of protein, and we've looked at this, and we've tested a very large body of clients over the years to see who gets knocked out and who doesn't. It looks like, in terms of intermittent fasting, if you do use certain protein products, and I would even recommend graduating from a whey protein powder to a collagen-based peptide powder that actually has less of an effect. The caloric value is close to 0, even though it's really quite substantial. Same thing with exogenous ketones, and then you can keep adding more protein to that. You can add branched-chain amino acids in a powder form. Throw in something benign like coconut water, for instance, a couple of other things that I may recommend, but it keeps you in the zone. Perfect. So it looks like you're pushing yourself through to 16 hours a day.
Okay, now, there's a lot of talk about the benefits of working out in a fasted state. Let's talk about that, okay? So what I do is I wake up in the morning and I go to do the Mind Valley 10X protocol in the gym. And then when I'm done with that, within 40 minutes or so, I take my protein powder.
Very good.
With wheatgrass, with butter, with creatine, and sometimes I add other superfoods to it in powdered form.
Wonderful.
Okay, so that is considered healthy.
That's correct.
But there's also this idea that when you work out in a fasted state, it's not really good for building up muscles because your body breaks down muscles.
Actually, the reverse is true. What we now know, based on extended studies, one of them, studies done by Ori Hofmeckler, who's one of the more remarkable trainers worldwide, former Israeli army guy, wrote several books on intermittent fast. He wrote The Warrior Diet. He wrote Maximum Muscle, Minimum Fat, which is an overview, a more scientific overview of the Warrior Diet without a lot of the commercial aspects to it. And he laid out a tremendous argument, as several other trainers have, on working out while you're fasting. What's occurring when you fast and you work out is you're prepping your body to actually rebound the minute that you introduce food. The whole point is kind of like a rubber band that you're pulling back. You're holding back you're actually in a glycogen depleted state. So your muscles are very low on sugar at that point, which is really what you want. You're hopefully burning primarily ketones, and then you're doing your workout. And your muscles will work out remarkably well on a high amount of ketones. So we do know that doing workouts while in a fasted state are really quite remarkable. Many of the runs that I do before I'll have my smoothie.
I see. But isn't there a risk that if your body doesn't have the right fuel to burn, it's going to burn up muscle? So shouldn't you be taking, say, something like HMB which is a supplement, before working out, if you're working out in a fasted state?
I love HMB. I think hydroxymethylbutyrate, among the branched-chain amino acids, is one of the more remarkable ones, and it won't knock you out at all. So you can, if you want to, and for the sake of this talk, I would say we're going to get more technical. What I may do is have branched-chain amino acids. Instead of having a smoothie, I'm just going to have a beverage. I'm going to have a glass of water. I'm going to put branched-chain amino acids. I may pop some additional leucine, HMB with that, exogenous ketones, and then go for my run. I'm essentially in a fasted state, and I've loaded up my body with substantial amount of amino acids. Ben Greenfield is very much into a full spectrum amino acid powder. You may want to add that too. But what we do know is that when you're doing that and then you eat, what happens is your body rewards you with a tremendous amount of growth factors. So like a rubber band being snapped back, once you eat, within 40 minutes to an hour after you've completed your run, your workout, having been fasted, you start to produce a higher amount of growth hormone, muscle growth factor, ligament growth factor. You just start to make a better you. And what we've noticed is, again, in my client body, and also working with my own body over the past 10 years, doing intermittent fasting and fasting before workouts, is I come back with greater muscle and less fat overall. So the results are really quite extraordinary, but you're looking for the reward at the end of the fast. Remember that it's just not working out while you're fasting. It's working out while you're fasting and then eating something.
Right.
And then it's that tends to trigger all the kind of feedback loops that produce higher amounts of human growth hormone, muscle growth factor, et cetera, which is really what you're looking for. So it's not just the fasting while you're working out, it's the making sure that once you're done with your workout, you're consuming something within an hour.
And what is a great thing to consume after a workout?
I got to tell you, I like the fact that you're doing a very high protein smoothie. You know, that's the way that I'll tend to go. But I may throw in some more fat. I may throw in half of an avocado. I may put in almond butter. I'll probably put in a handful of blueberries, coconut milk, coconut water, cashew milk, pea milk, something like that.
And I'm guessing what we should absolutely not do is take a Gatorade or any other bullshit energy drink.
No, not at all. And if you look, I mean, based on what we're talking about, we could talk about any number of products that are out there that are like super electrolyte beverages that have high amounts of the right amount of sodium and potassium that your body's going to utilize properly so that you get your electrolyte levels back up. You know, Gatorade is very old school, and enough companies have done it better. Right. So if you're going to have a smoothie in the way that you're doing, you can get a really good electrolyte product that's available in the market that actually has also ascorbic acid to drive sodium deeper into your adrenal system, and a couple of other nutrients in there too. So you have like a super electrolyte product.
But what I'm guessing you want to avoid are the ones that have high sugar content,
That's
such
correct.
as Powerade or Gatorade, which, as you said, is based on bad science.
And antiquated science.
Antiquated science, right?
Exactly. You know, so making up for your electrolytes, I think that's critical, especially if we're running here in Sardinia. You know, it's a super hot day. I mean, I've got an electrolyte powder that I bought from New York. That goes into my kind of cobbled together smoothie that I'm having most mornings here. So to make up for what I'm losing in terms of sweat when I'm running out in the heat in the mornings over here.
I see. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Now, one of the questions that we get is, when we go on a 3-day fast, okay, pure water, what do we do about the feelings of hunger that's going to come to us? Do you get hungry, or do you hit a bump and then overcome it?
A very good question, and I'm asked that all the time. We got to look at evolution for the answer to that. We're a certain kind of predator. We're probably the best predator that's ever lived on this planet. We've eaten species into extinction. We're considered an apex predator. So it's kind of like we're on the top of the feeding hill, so to say. Underneath that big drop, you get the big cats, you get the big killer fish, predatory fish like sharks, etc. And what that's done, being the kind of predator that we are, and being a predator in any case, you're always hungry. You know, you don't find too many predators that are walking around on a hunt and they're not hungry, especially in a competitive environment for calories, and we're talking 10, 20, 50,000 years ago. If you're looking at an antelope and you're a human, you're a sapien, and you're ready to go for the kill, there's probably a lot of competitive eyeballs, but besides yours, looking at the same animal. So as you take off and hope you get it, you'll be lucky if you get one antelope every 3 or 4 days, maybe. So you're dealing with intermittent fasting already. You're already hungry. And what we know is that a little bit of hunger is not a bad thing. There seems to be other things that your body rewards you with when you're a little bit hungry some of the time. You know, I don't have a problem with it. I think that you get to a point when you're doing intermittent fasting enough where you understand what hunger is and you're not so fearful of it. You understand that it's part of being a predator and that it's not going to kill you. You're not going to die.
Right.
But many people need to work their way up to that. So again, that's why I'm saying you start off by losing one meal.
Losing dinner or losing
Correct.
breakfast. Right.
And bit by bit, you come to understand that hunger is not going to kill you.
Right.
Now, that being said, I'm still looking for the hack. You know, there are days where your blood sugar is being depleted, your ketones are just not there, your brain requires fuel, it's a long day. So that's where I'll use certain things to my advantage, like caffeine on a regular basis,
right.
You know, throughout the fasting period.
So Oz, thank you so much. That was mind-blowing for me. What would be a good actionable step, a next step for the people watching who might want to try intermittent fasting on themselves?
I'm very big on education, so I would always recommend that they go online and they find out, you know, what intermittent fasting is. There are any number of books that are out there that I think will also give you the proper steps. So if you're into getting a little bit more data in that regard, I would recommend Warrior Diet. It's very simple.
What's it called?
It's called The Warrior Diet.
The Warrior Diet.
By Ori Hofmeckler. I think it's the easiest book to actually put under your belt in terms of putting it all together and going, okay, I get it, I can do this, and you know, how do I begin, and so on. An actionable first step is to prepare yourself. You know that, you know, if you're going to embark on what we're talking about, prepare yourself by picking, like I said, one meal that you're going to skip. And what I would typically recommend is either you're going to skip breakfast or you're going to skip dinner. And start with one day. Do 1 day a week for 4 weeks. See if you can do that. Then what I would do is I would do alternate weeks. I would do 1 week where you're doing 1 day, where you're missing a meal. Then the B week or the second week of the month, I would go for 2 meals. And the following week, the third week, I'd go back to 1. And the fourth week of the month, I would go back to losing 2 meals again. And so you're building up over the course of about 3 months.
And again, when you say losing a meal, it doesn't mean that you're not eating. You can take bulletproof coffee.
That is correct.
You can take the
caffeinated beverages. You can have miso broth.
You can also take the protein shake protocol, which
that is correct.
Which I suggest. What about alkalizers for the wildfitters out there?
Okay, so explain that to me.
So alkalizer would be it's a common drink that people take when they're on WildFit, which is Mind Valley's nutrition program, and it's basically a lot of veggies, no sugar, no fruit, a lot of veggies just blended together.
Okay, so let me add to that. We'd spoken earlier about electrolytes. Mm-hmm. So I think that's terrific. One of the things that I would recommend that may make it even more actionable is to fill up a 4-quart pot with vegetables of all kinds. Fill it up with as much water as the pot can hold, probably be somewhere close to about 3 quarts. Bring it all to a boil on very low heat. What you're going to do is pour off the water, and you're going to drink the water, and you're going to eat the vegetables separately. So
I see. So you drink the water, but the vegetables you keep them for after your fasted state.
So if you want to get a super electrolyte beverage, the best one you're going to get in the world is all the water that comes off of having boiled these vegetables. So you put a fork right through a potato and the thing just falls apart.
I see.
Right? And then everything else you can whip up and you can have that also separately.
Got it. But then why is wheatgrass okay? Why is wheatgrass powder okay in my morning shake?
I think all green powders. There's several that I like a lot. There's a chlorella one that I think is phenomenal. I think spirulina is fantastic.
So green powders are okay, but
Yes.
but blending up the veggies is going to be giving you, I guess, fiber and
It's all fiber.
right,
And
that would put you out of your fasted state.
again, as I think about it, and having done enough fast, having done what I just said, I haven't found myself getting knocked out.
Okay.
So you can stay in a fasted state indefinitely by having something like that. Remember that what you're doing then is you're mimicking periodic fasting.
Right.
Right? So doing that doesn't knock you out of a fasting zone at all.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That makes sense. So an Alkagizer or
Very
a protein
good.
shake will not knock you out of fasting
That is
because
correct.
it is in fact that third category, which is periodic fasting.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Okay, that answers our questions. Thank you everyone for tuning in. You know what to do next. Can't wait to hear your stories on what happens when you start trying out intermittent fasting. And thank you, Garcia.
Thank you, V. Thank you very much.